Welcome to Shakespeare the Whole Year, a series of research based, student friendly talks on various aspects of Shakespeare's works, hosted by the Shakespeare Society of India East Zone under the aegis of SSI New Delhi. We dedicate this series to the memory of late Professor Vikram Chopra, who was functioning as president of SSI New Delhi and has been a constant support during the conceptualization of this series. The speaker for the first talk, titled Romeo and Juliet Meets Rural India, Sairat and the Representation of Women, is Dr. Nishi Pulugurtha, Associate Professor, Department of English, Brahmananda Keshav Chandra College, Kolkata. Her areas of interest are British Romantic literature, Indian writing in English, the diaspora, Shakespeare adaptations in film. Dr. Pulugurtha has published in refereed international and national journals, in the Coleridge Bulletin, the Encyclopedia of Postcolonial Studies, Shakespeare and Indian Cinemas, Local Habitations, edited by Poonam Trivedi and Paramita Chakraborty, The Cambridge Companion to British Romanticism and Religion, edited by Geoffrey W. Barbour, among others. She has a monograph on Derozio and a collection of travel essays out in the open, an edited volume of essays on travel, Across and Beyond, 2 volumes of poems, The Real and the Unreal and Other Poems, Raindrops on the Periwinkle, and a collection of short stories titled The Window Sill. She has edited a special issue of Café Dissensus on epidemics, pandemics, and literature, and a special feature issue of Muse India on Shakespeare in Indian cinema. Dr. Pulugurtha's edited volume of essays, Literary Representation of Pandemics, Epidemics, and Pestilence, has just been published by Routledge. She also writes on Alzheimer's disease.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nishi Pulugurtha, Associate Professor, Department of English, Brahmananda Keshav Chandra College, Kolkata. And in this video presentation, I am going to talk about the Marathi film Sairat, and which is an adaptation of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. I would like to mention right at the outset that this particular presentation was first presented in a different version, of course, at the Women and Indian Shakespeare's conference organized by Queen's University Belfast in November 2019. And a much expanded version of it appears in the volume Women and Indian Shakespeare's, edited by Mark Thornton Burnett, Thea Buckley, Sangeeta Datta, and Rosa Garcia Periagu, which was published by Bloomsbury just a few months ago. The title of my presentation is Romeo and Juliet Meets Rural India, Sairat and the Representation of Women. Indian cinemas, both regional and Bollywood, have seen many adaptations and appropriations of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And it's interesting to note that most of these adaptations have been great box office successes. And the play Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, seems to be particularly suited to the Indian popular audience taste. Families in conflict with one another, parents who create obstructions and restrictions, lovers who are doomed to fail, quarrels, suicide, and death. These are features, I think, which are commonly seen in quite a number of Indian cinemas as well. The earliest Indian adaptation of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet in film is a Tamil film, a 1937 Tamil film called Ambika Pati, which was directed by L.S.R. Dungan, which was later remade in 1957 by P. Neelakanthan. Thea Buckley, in an interesting essay, regards the 1937 film as, and I quote from her essay, a critical point in the evolution of regional Indian film and its inheritance of Shakespeare on screen. The film, Thea notes in that essay, highlights relational dynamics between lovers who transgress socially sanctioned boundaries, setting up a conflict between individual and collective needs. K. Balachander's Telugu film Maro Charitra, which was released in 1978, which was remade in Hindi as Ek Duje Ke Liye, once again directed by K. Balachander himself in 1981. Mansoor Khan's Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak, Manish Tiwari's Isak, Habib Faisal's Ishaq Zadeh, Sanjay Leela Bansali's Goliyon Ki Las Leela Ram Leela, Aparna Sen's Arshi Nagor, and of course this film that I'm going to talk about, Nagaraj Manjule's Sairat, are many of the films that use the Romeo and Juliet story. The Marathi film Priyatama, which was released in 2014, the story of Parshia, who belongs to the nomadic Potraj community and falls in love with the Patil's daughter Gauri, locates the Romeo and Juliet story as well in Maharashtra in the 1950s. This film does bring in caste and class differences. However, the issue of caste is not clearly referred to in the film. In my presentation, I'm going to talk about the way in which the woman protagonist has been represented in Nagaraj Manjule's film Sairat, which was released in 2016. This love story, Sairat, is a love story of a lower caste, poor fisherman's son and an upper class Maratha rich local politician's daughter became the highest grossing Marathi movie. The film, made on a shoestring budget of rupees 4 crores, went on to make 82.95 crore rupees in Maharashtra alone. It earned a total of 110 crore rupees at the end of its theatrical run. This particular film is Nagaraj Manjule's second film and follows on from his first feature film Fandri, which was released in 2013, which won the 61st National Filmfare Award for Best Feature Film by a Director. In Sairat, Archana Patil, who is referred to as Archie, played by Rinku Rajguru, the heroine of the film, is a character less often encountered in Indian cinemas because of the way she has agency and she does use it. The first half of the film represents an independent young woman who defies conventions and stereotypes. The film goes on to explore ideas of gender, of caste, in a very, very nuanced way. Archana belongs to the upper caste. She belongs to the Maratha caste, while the hero of the film, Prashant, played by Akash Thosar, is a Dalit. The film also goes on to bring in the terrible brutality of honor killings that have been seen in India in recent years as well. One of the reasons as to why Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet has possibly been open to so much of film adaptations is what Courtney Lehman suggests, and I'm quoting from her work, where she says that the profound sense of the tragic inevitability that fuels Shakespeare's play is one of the reasons for the popularity of this particular play in film adaptations. The actress and director Aparna Sen, while reflecting why she chose the Romeo and Juliet story for a Bengali film Arshi Nagor, which was released in 2015, notes that Shakespeare's film speaks of love in the time of strife, love in the midst of strife. And she argues, she says she believes very strongly that it is love only which can be an antidote to violence and intolerance. Cinematic adaptation, as Michael Purcell argues, is a blend of the verbal and the visual, with the ultimate aim being the integration of all of these, so that the visual enhances, supports the text, and vice versa. Film adaptations work on plays to create new text, new ways of looking at the play, and presenting and representing Shakespeare. And what one notices in these adaptations and representations of Shakespeare in film are various registers, various strategies that form fascinating avenues to consider and to explore when one examines texts that rework Shakespeare in new cultural and linguistic scenarios. In this particular film, Sairat, and I'm going to talk about it in a little detail about the film, and of course, one of the reasons why Shakespeare has been so much, why Shakespeare's plays have been adapted into various Indian films is because of the presence of Shakespeare in India for a very, very long time. There have been translations, adaptations, performances, recitations of Shakespeare since the mid 18th century, and this is not just in Hindi or in Tamil or Telugu or in Bengali, but in various other languages in India as well. For instance, in Marathi, there have been quite a number of translations. For instance, Nana Saheb Peshwa translated Hamlet in 1857, and after 1860, many more plays by Shakespeare were translated into the Marathi language. And we see there was a Marathi adaptation of Shakespeare which is seen in the work of V.J. Kirtane. Othello was adapted in 1867 by the well-known dramatist Mahadev Govind Shastri Kolatkar, while there have also been adaptations of The Tempest, King Lear, Midsummer Night's Dreams, and Romeo and Juliet, which were very popular on the Marathi stage as well. A little bit about the film right now. The film Sairat is set in a village which is called Bitargaon, and the word Sairat means freedom, liberation, but it could also mean wild and reckless. And all of these meanings are, I think, important to understand the film and the character of the central protagonist, the woman protagonist, Archana. Sairat reinterprets Shakespeare's story of the star-crossed lovers and presents a hero who's very different from that seen in other adaptations of the play in Indian cinemas. And while talking about this, Nagaraj Manjule in an interview states that his film Sairat is a reaction to Bollywood. Because here in this film, Manjule challenges caste, class and gender stereotypes. He tries to present B.R. Ambedkar's idea of India to his audience, Ambedkar's idea which envisions a society that is free from divisions and bias based on caste, class and gender. Throughout Sairat, one notices that Manjule seems to be engaging with this idea of creating equal opportunities for all. And I think this is one of the reasons why the first half of the film is set in the rural countryside, where signs of prosperity are clearly visible. Bitargaon is a village in the Solapur district of Maharashtra in western India, and Manjule himself figures as the cricket commentator in the opening scene of the film. And Bitargaon is like any other small village in the area. The economy is agrarian, with sugarcane as the chief cash crop. And the first half of the film, Sairat, has many scenes shot in the sugarcane fields that provide a visually striking backdrop while clearly pointing to the importance of the popular sugar lobby in the state. The heroine's father in the film is the village patil, the village chief, and belongs to the Maratha class linked closely to the sugar lobby. While caste hierarchies matter in the film and are rigidly enforced, Sairat also does reveal some interaction between different castes. For instance, we see this in the cricket match with which the film opens, and in the college class social interactions, which are absolutely temporal in the film. A lower caste young man, Prashant Kale, who is referred to as Parshia by his friends, falls in love with Archana Patil, a young woman, as I said, from the upper caste. And Parshia is completely besotted by Archie in a way that recalls Romeo's lines from the play Love is a Smoke Made with the Fume of Sighs. There is a song in the film called Yad Lagle, which captures this love-struck, a melodious song which wonderfully captures this love-struck Parshia and the madness most discreet evident in his actions. The roles of Archana and Parshia are played by young newcomers Akash Thosar and Rinku Rajguru, who bring a kind of a raw energy to the characters. Archana is a spoilt daughter of the wealthy sugarcane baron. She moves her way around in Bitargaon, very well aware of her own social status, the money, the power. Parshia, on the other hand, is a fisherman's son who belongs to the Parthi class. He lives in a village, on the village outskirts, in a dwelling that distinguishes the Dalit lived space from the upper caste neighborhood. The lover's story is hence framed within the caste politics that threatens to wreck their love and their lives. Parshia is of course greatly helped by two of his friends, Salim Sheikh and Prashant Bhansode. And the two of them help Parshia and Archie. And they are the ones who reach out to Parshia's family when things go very, very bad. What first draws Archie's attention to Parshia is the fact that he is a meritorious student in a co-educational college. Parshia writes poetry for the College Wall magazine. Interestingly, there's a scene in the film where the professor in the college teaches them the poetry of the Marathi poet Keshav Sut, which is the pen name of Krishnaji Keshav Damle, who was writing between 1886 and 1905. Who is responsible for introducing the sonnet into the Marathi language. This and the fact that Parshia writes poetry suggest an association with Romeo and Juliet, in which sonnets figure prominently. I think we could also here recall the melancholic lover Romeo and even Orlando carving his verses on trees. The blackboard, when the professor is in the class, as he's reciting lines from the Keshav Sut's poems, the blackboard has, and the poem that he is reciting is a poem that talks about a world order that would be beyond caste and class boundaries. And at that point of time, on the board at the back, there are certain phrases, social equality, black and white together. And there is also the title of a poem by the American black author Richard Wright, which is called I Have Seen Black Hands. And I think these are important registers in the film because they bring together visually and textually common themes running between discussions of race and caste. The professor in the film also recites from the work of Namdev Dhasal, a Marathi Dalit poet, whose poetry reflects the realities of the lives of Dalits and speaks of the way in which the Dalits have been marginalized. A world, and this is very, very important because the world that is depicted in the film is a world where caste discrimination is soon going to rear its ugly head. So these are important registers that we see throughout the film. When the affair becomes known, the professor, advises Parshia to dump Archie because that is exactly what an upper caste man would do to a lower caste woman. And Parshia vehemently opposes this because he is in love. Archana's brother Prince, who beats up the professor at some point of time, stands for the Tybalt character using a sword. There's a scene in the film where he uses his sword to cut the birthday cake and kind of expresses an aggressive hypermasculinity. He's one of these male relatives who later on visit this couple and brutally decide Archana's fate. Indian cinema, as a generally has not has mostly elided caste as a theme. There have been certain films, and one is reminded of Bala Yogini or Nandanar, Ankur, Sujata, Rudraveena, Bandit Queen, Mukta, but these are just a few. Most of the time, Indian cinema has not spoken about this. And Nagaraj Manjule's first film, Fandre and Sairat, form part of what could be referred to as Dalit cinema, where you have these filmmakers trying to bring out, to represent Dalit subjectivities and socio-cultural issues. The activist and the critic and the scholar Suraj Yangde notes that Dalit cinema, and I'm quoting from him, he says, Dalit cinema can be understood as a celluloid movement of visual creative art made by Dalit filmmakers relating to Dalit subjectivities, inspiring socio-cultural criticism, and as a universal movement of time and space, unquote. The hero of Sairat, Parshia, is presented as a handsome young man who attends college and, as I said earlier, is a meritorious student. And it is his securing high marks in examination that first draws Archana's attention towards him. And by making the Dalit young man handsome, good-looking and fair, the film, I think, challenges the conventional representation of beauty that is usually seen in the representation of privileged and upper caste protagonists in Indian cinema. The film also questions the flamboyance of the masculine Indian film hero, because Parshia, who looks very much like the hero, is at one point of time beaten up by men sent by Archie's father and is unable to retaliate at all. In the film, Parshia's parents, once the affair is known, are socially ostracized, and his parents are forced to leave the village where they have to face a panchayat, and there is a distinct marginalization in their living conditions as well. The second half of the film, Sairat, is set in Hyderabad, where Archie and Parshia run off in order to escape the wrath of Archie's father and in order to escape the wrath of the other upper caste locals who are against their love affair. And what is interesting to see that here in Hyderabad, as they are trying to work their way to create a new space, a new home for themselves, a new life for themselves, Parshia resorts to domestic violence. Frustration in the way life shapes up disturbs this very rosy, imaginative life of love. And we see Parshia doubting Archie, suspecting her, hitting her. Right? And Archie is fearless when we first see her, flamboyantly driving a tractor, taking her brother's motorcycle for a spin, and then challenging gender norms. And when they fall in love, it is she who decides on the course of action when things become very, very difficult for them in Bittergaon. And it is she who first expresses her love for him and asks for his number. And, Manjule in an interview says, and I'm quoting from this interview, I'm tired of a mail order where women are props and wanted to give it a shake. The strong, independent women in the villages around me were inspirations for the female lead, he says in this interview. On the other hand, Parshia is much slow to realize Archie's intentions, to understand her actions, and even slow to reacting. And when the young couple are caught by Archana's father, it is Archana who creates a huge furor in this police station, where she says that it is not Parshia who wanted to run off with me, but it was I who wanted to. Right. And when she sees Parshia and Parshia's friends Salim and Prashant being beaten up, she jumps into the fray and she runs off with Parshia then. However, all this is to be noted that she challenges these social norms mostly within the context of her family and the space of the village. Later on in the film, in the second half of the film, when they have moved to Hyderabad, as I said a little while ago, we notice that she kind of reverts to these stereotypical gender norms as she gives in and even forgives Pasha's abusive behavior. In Hyderabad, the young couple are helped by a kind older woman called Suman, who is a single mother and who comes to their rescue, who gives them shelter. And I think Suman is the nurse counterpart in the film. And she's possibly the only other woman in the film with a degree of independence. Archana begins to work in a factory, and later on, of course, things become a little better. They buy a scooter, and the beautiful sugarcane fields, the river, and the rural landscape gives away to the depiction of the realities of life in the second part of the film. And I think Hyderabad and that part of the film that is set in Hyderabad could be seen as a version of the period of exile in Romeo and Juliet, a state of exile that ultimately becomes home to this young couple. And Archana, in Hyderabad, Archana has difficulties in adjusting to the terrible circumstances that they have to be through. And however, she tries her level best to, adjust. There are times when she misses her family very badly, but she wants to go home. She wants to talk to her mother, but she's trying to her level best to kind of, work in the kind of circumstances that she is in. In the film, when we see the two falling in love and exchanging letters, it is, in Romeo and Juliet, we have Juliet sending her nurse as a messenger, and in Sairat, it is a small boy who needs to be bribed by Pasha to act as his emissary. Like the Sapna Juliet character in Maro Charitra and the Rashmi Juliet character in Kayamat Se Kayamat Tak, Archie controls what she does until the affair becomes known. While Nagaraj Manjule does talk about the fact that he wanted to make his film women-centric, we need to understand that the Dalit woman is kind of missing from this particular film. The end of the film is disturbing in a very hauntingly nuanced way, because the end is a reminder of honor killings, which are so much a part of the social structure. And the end comes at a point of time when things seem happy and settled. And, 4 male relatives, including Archie's brother Prince, come to her home. And by now, Archie and Parshia are married. They even have a small child. And this little child is with the neighbors when the relatives come in. And they come into her home. And Parshia was away. When he comes back, when he sees them, he's a bit taken aback. But then, Archana kind of says that, see, they've bought gifts for us. And these 4 relatives, male relatives, begin to look through the albums. And the photographs in the album are of a happy family. And the camera then moves away from this to the small child who is with the neighbor. And the child is coming back home. The neighbor has just dropped the child in the house. And as the baby moves in, the camera moves into the house where we see the blood-spattered bodies of Archie and Pasha. And the child looks at them for a while and begins to cry, and not knowing what to do, walks out of the house. And as the child walks out, the footprints that the child leaves behind are those of blood. Sairat, I think, is unique in adaptations of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, because in featuring a child, and the innocent cries and the bloodied footsteps serve to highlight the culture of hatred and violence. And this particular scene at the end has absolutely no sound, not even the crying of the child. It's absolutely quiet. And the role of Archie's family reveals the extent of patriarchal control over a woman's body, a control the family has been trying to exercise right from the beginning, but could not because of Archie's resistance. Caste, class, gender in Sairat are overlapping categories that result in discrimination. And the film is mounted on a very, very realistic scale with no lavish set, with no costumes. On the contrary, the film depicts very simple events and situations. For instance, a ladder being used to climb up on a makeshift pavilion during a cricket match, the rich son cutting his birthday cake with a sword, a woman barging into the cricket match to drive her wayward son home, and the beautiful courtship scenes that take place under this backdrop of wells and fields. Sugarcane fields. Sairat's box office success resulted in remakes of the film in several Indian languages, including in Bengali. The film was called Noor Jahan, in Odia, Laila O Laila, in Punjabi, Channa Meriya, in Kannada, Manasa Mallige, and of course also in Hindi as Dhadak. However, the Hindi film miserably failed at the box office by making simply a Romeo and Juliet love story without any new elements, and by mounting it in a very stereotypical Bollywood fashion. I think Dhadak didn't appeal to audiences. In Shakespeare and the Problem of Adaptation, Margaret Jane Kidney speaks about adaptation as the addition of new material alongside substantial cutting and rearranging, and a transformation where characters are made more simple and represented in relation to a new set of activities. And I think Sairat functions precisely in these ways. It brings in important issues into visibility and offers a commentary on contemporary Indian society. What Paramita Chakraborty notes with reference to recent Bengali film adaptations of Shakespeare's plays, I think, is applicable to other Indian language adaptations that rework Shakespeare in multiple ways. Commenting on the Bengali language adaptations, Chakraborty notes, and I quote, "Shakespeare is not a signifier of a culture or identity, but merely a resource to be used to narrate the story of millennial Kolkata and its denizens. Shakespeare," she argues, and I quote, "provides a medium for articulating local identities, and paradoxically, it is through these increasing forms of localization that Shakespeare's universality survives," unquote. Sairat, I think, brings the realities of honor feuds and killings, caste and caste oppression to the fore and challenges gender stereotypes. With its nuanced presentation and its wonderful music and score by Ajay Atul, fresh actors who bring credibility to its story and its delivery, Sairat succeeded brilliantly with audiences in India. Sairat, I think, is Shakespearean in sweep, with its balconies, letters, characters hiding behind bushes, and most of all, the star-crossed lovers. As with other adaptations of Shakespeare on film and elsewhere, Sairat represents the Romeo and Juliet story as a very powerful and important story for our times. Thank you.